Protests on Portland streets are a regular sight, and in the past year, we've seen even more than usual. But recently, there has been an increase in protests that aren't linked to police reform. Migrant communities have been taking to the streets to oppose violence and injustice in their home countries. Our news partners at Willamette Week recently followed some of these movements as they made their voices heard over the conflicts taking place thousands of miles away. That is the topic of this week's Willamette Week cover story. Joining us to talk about it now is Willamette Week reporter Suzette Smith. Suzette, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
What are some of the migrant communities you saw represented at these marches? Sure.
The three main focuses were people who their families immigrated from Myanmar, so they're Burmese people. And then we also talked about people who were refugees from Palestine. And then we also talked to Colombians who now live here. And those are also three sites of recent unrest in those countries. So that was sort of why we covered them.
We've certainly seen a whole lot of protests in the Portland area over the last year or so. What sets these demonstrations apart from the nightly protests we saw over the summer?
Sure. These protests they remind me a lot of the early George Floyd protests we saw over the summer. Daytime marches, often potluck focused, lots of food, communities coming together. It's interesting that I would say that these protests are focused on education and awareness raising, trying to get messages out, whereas certainly the protests we saw over the summer were more about talking to your local legislature or, there's not as many of them, so they're not as focused on trying to reach elected officials.
Suzette, what stood out to you most from the time with these different groups?
Sure. It was really amazing. The Colombian population didn't really know each other. So by coming together to protest, one of my subjects, she said, we just wanted to see who would come out. We wanted to see who were the Colombians in Portland. So in that way, they were able to meet each other. And it was really cool watching them just at the protest be taking each other's numbers and planning to hang out later. I thought that was really amazing.
I'm sure a lot of folks don't even realize this is happening out there. So thanks for filling us in. Suzette Smith from Willamette Week. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
You can read the entire article in the latest edition of Willamette Week on newsstands now or online at wweek.com.